I'm just gonna full screen the presentation, and I know we have a couple more people who are joining, but in the interest of time, I'm sort of going to get started. I know this is going to be recorded and shared across both our communities. Let me just full screen. So, first of all, thank you so much, Prad, for having us here and everyone here at Bankless. I know we have a big community as well at Phonon, and many of which are dedicated Bankless readers and listeners. And it's really great to be here and to be able to share a little bit of what we've been working on. A few weeks ago, I guess a research group out of Bankless gave a presentation on Phonon and the things we're working on. Surrounding private keys and this sort of pretty innovative infrastructure that's being built at Phonon. And we actually had nothing to do with that, and we were really pleased, happy, surprised, and excited to see some of our work being recognized. And we've been really heads down for the past, as far as the DAO is concerned, 18 months, and building out what we think is one of the most exciting infrastructure projects in the space. So that was really, really great. And we then heard on Twitter that there were more questions that arose from the presentation that was given here at Bankless. And so we were Brad was gracious enough to reach out to or talk to us, and we sort of set up a time to come in here and tell you a little bit more about what Phonon is and what it's about. And lucky enough, we have not just me and my not so beautiful voice, but we have one of the most beautiful voices in crypto here, which is Justin LaRue, who's going to lead us through a quick presentation on Phonon. We're going to go through a few slides and then open up everything for questions. So if you do have a question, just hold on to it. We'll get to it. And then we have some other members from the DAO who are going to join from the development team in case things want to get a little more technical. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Justin, and I'm going to full screen the presentation. And Justin, whenever you want to change slides, just let me know.
All right, sounds good. A lot of pressure on my voice now. I anticipate it just, cracking out of nervousness. Well, thank you so much for having us, as Mickey shared. My background is I'm currently the CEO at hardware wallet manufacturer Grid Plus. And the Phonon protocol was something we actually developed internally for another project. We developed a spec for it, but it was so far beyond the scope of what we were building with a team of our size that we thought the way that this should be handled was to spin it out into a public protocol. So the DAO functions essentially as a standards body. The way I always envisioned this was something like the relationship between the EF and the client teams, with Plus continuing to support with reference implementation and a client to work from. So, do I sound okay on everyone else's end? Someone's pinging me that I'm very quiet.
Yeah, you're
better?
But I turned you up.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So what is Phonon? Why are we making it? Well, Phonon is not a new blockchain. It's not a new DeFi protocol. It is a new tool set to augment the crypto you already have and endow it with the properties of physical cash. Blockchain technology as it exists today can either be a tool for financial freedom, as the Bankless DAO, among all other people, knows very well. It can also be a tool that can be used for financial surveillance. And that's why I feel adamantly that it's important that we retain something that has the functionality of physical cash in a digital world. Crypto as it exists today does not have those properties. And what is the reason for that? Well, everyone, when they started dabbling with Bitcoin and got their weed off of Silk Road, thought they were doing this anonymously. Instead, they were putting it on a globally viewable ledger. Therefore, if you have ever used an exchange account, a centralized exchange, to transfer that Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency to your accounts, you are basically giving analytics tools direct access to all of your financial transactions and history. So what can we do to get around this? Well, there's different things people have tried. There's fantastic work being done with zero knowledge proofs. There are privacy specific chains. I always felt those were a non-starter, in particular because I don't want to transfer to a different currency just to have privacy. Like, it doesn't make sense to exchange out of an ecosystem into a separate ecosystem entirely just for a private transaction. So what does Phonon do? This brings us to the idea of, I think where people got hung up on the presentation from Aladdin DAO. What we're doing is we're enabling off-chain transactions using secure hardware, not proprietary secure hardware. It's an open standard using anything that has a puff chip. So what's a puff chip? Physically unclonable. And it's the same exact chip that's in your credit and debit cards today. And critically, it's also in your phone's eSIM. So this is an important aspect of it. But I do want to just say, why do I think cash is so important when we're all focused on cryptocurrency? Mickey, I'll let you take over on the next slide. I just want to get into a personal anecdote I know I've shared with our DAO at some point. I've spent a lot of time in my life traveling back and forth to China. And I remember recently going to a shopping mall in the Northeast. So now, with each visit, I realized there were fewer and fewer opportunities to use cash. Everyone's using WeChat. Everyone's paying via QR codes. As a traveler without a Chinese bank account, this became increasingly unwieldy. And I found myself once visiting this brand new, gorgeous, 8-story mall in the Northeast. And we pulled into the parking garage and I was like, oh my God, city center. We don't have to pay. We're just driving right in. There's no booth. There's no ticket. And as I left at the end of the day and we're driving out, the gate comes down. There's no booth. And I had no idea what was going on. The only way to get out was actually paying with a WeChat QR code. And the way that they associated your WeChat account with the amount of time you spent in the garage was by scanning your license plate. So the idea that there is a financial system of any sort that is an open book to the government is just not something that I personally feel comfortable with. This is aside from the issue of issuance itself and monetary policy. It's just a matter of cash is a useful tool because it's peer-to-peer, it's private, it's fast, and it's free. And these are the properties we want to bring to the crypto you have now by allowing secure off-chain transactions. I think Mickey wants to get into the implications a little bit, so I'll let you take it away on the next slide. But I want to circle back to these properties and address the private key concerns that came up on the Aladdin DAO presentation.
Yep. Sorry, I jumped. I got
No, enthusiasm is good.
Yes. So, as Justin was saying, the raison d'être, the purpose of Phonon is to augment the ecosystem, to help keep some of the promises that were made early on from the Bitcoin white paper, extending now into Ethereum and beyond. And we talked a little bit about what it is. And I want to talk sort of briefly about this secure hardware component that is mentioned and was mentioned in our talk, and I want to go a little bit deeper on it. So you are already using secure hardware probably every day, probably multiple times a day. In your hands, probably right now, or in your pocket, are examples of secure hardware. These puff chips, these physically unclonable functions, and these are little chips that exist inside of credit cards and cell phones. So basically, inside your cell phone right now, or your credit card, is a tiny piece of silicon. And that silicon is as unique as a snowflake. Each of us have unique pieces of silicon in these little chips. And those little chips, those little pieces of silicon, are used by, let's say, Apple Pay or Visa or MasterCard to authenticate that it was Prad who bought the coffee in the cafe in Paris and not Justin. That's the way these systems have been built. And so when Visa or MasterCard or Apple or these other companies are using these properties, essentially they're operating in these closed systems, right? This is a very closely guarded piece of technology, right? This puff-based authenticating system, which has the capacity to transfer, billions of dollars, right? In a secure methodology, right? This is not new technology. What's new and what's novel is for the first time, or I don't know for the first time, but it's certainly an iteration of this technology, which is open source, which can be built upon like a technology stack and acts more like a public good than something like Visa or MasterCard. And so the question is, and was exciting to me when I first heard about Phonon not too long ago, was like, wow, what if Apple Pay wasn't a company? What if Visa wasn't a company? What if it was a protocol? What if it was a technology stack we could build on top of? And what if it could be native to Web3? And what if it could interface with all these different crypto ecosystems that we've been exploring? And I know this is one of the topics that there were some questions around, and I just wanted to explore that a little bit more. So, and we're happy to answer questions after. But this technology exists and has been validated. It has been used for transactions all over the world and processes millions of transactions every single day. Justin, I don't know if you want to go a little deeper on the puff stuff.
So yeah, I'll get into that a little bit. Mickey hit on one thing that is of critical importance, which is the fact that each puff chip, each credit or debit card chip that you have now is physically unique like a snowflake. This is important because it's something that is verifiably random. It is a source of entropy for hashing values that cannot be replicated by somebody else who doesn't actually have your card, your PIN, all of your access. Or your phone for that matter. So what Phonon is doing, I think, let me go back a step. Working at Grid Plus and in hardware security, I was both a little frustrated how we got hung up with the other presentation, but also really heartened because I love that it resonated with people, like never share your private key. I spend all day working on solutions to help keep people's crypto safe. We walk users through best practices. So it's actually pretty encouraging that was people's initial gut reaction. But public key cryptography exists as a design space beyond just blockchain wallets. In particular, the way we can use it here is if we have these two sources of randomness for a handshake between, for a peer-to-peer transaction, what we can do is in a cryptographically verifiable manner, have a third private key that no one can directly access, right? That is passed around as a bearer instrument, and whomever ends up with it physically at the end, like a dollar bill, is the one who has access to redeem it back on chain. So a Phonon transaction, what does it look like? If you're a user with a smart card, a phone, or a hardware wallet that's compatible with this open protocol, you can create a Phonon, which is basically any crypto asset, any blockchain, and you're just basically loading that private key that you can't access or back up. You're loading it with those assets, and now it can be passed around freely. So one of the things that was so innovative about Bitcoin originally, and what it solved that Hashcash didn't, was the double spend problem. How are we ensuring that there is no way to spend the same money in two places? And how are we doing this without a separate ledger or blockchain? Well, we're not replacing them. We're adding functionality to them. So that private key, you derive the security of that Phonon itself from whatever blockchain it is on originally. It depends on the security of Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever other chain you're using. But then you're passing around access to that asset freely off-chain, peer-to-peer. So why is peer-to-peer important? Well, you're not leaving an on-chain trail. It is scalable in a way that blockchains are not. there's so much focus on L2s now and the different trade-offs made with rollups and the different topologies there. When you're doing peer-to-peer transactions, they are infinitely scalable. Each new user with a phone or a card or hardware wallet means that the system is scaling up with them. You can interact peer-to-peer as much as you want, and it doesn't impact the traffic on a given blockchain, because we're not moving anything on the blockchain. That value stays where it is, and you're just passing the right to the asset around securely. So what does this open up? Well, on an immediate level, being able to just seed a new wallet, to interact with people privately like you're just giving them cash in a transaction, is very valuable in the world of digital currencies, whether they are CBDCs or open blockchains as they exist today. And without cash, we lose that quality, that option. And we want to retain that optionality in a peer-to-peer world. So the only speed limitation is the speed of your network connection. And so we have scalability, the peer-to-peer aspect of it. Once you're off-chain, there's no cost to transact, and you're going at the speed of the internet itself. So that is how the private key element comes into play here. I hope that makes sense. I know that's kind of an unusual concept and at odds with how we tend to think of private keys in the context of blockchain wallets. So after Mickey speaks a little bit more, definitely open to questions on all of this, and we'll show a little diagram of what's actually going on under the hood as well.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback a little bit on what Justin's talking about and adding functionality, it's sort of like being able to load up your favorite cryptocurrency, in this case, and handing it to somebody along with a private key, and them knowing that you didn't have access to it anymore, and being able to hand it to them physically, like you would hand over cash. And there's applications that go far beyond that. But I think as a little bit of a mental model, you start to understand the structure of Phonon augmenting this technology, this blockchain technology over time to allow it to scale. There's really three major problems, I think, in this space that have existed for a long time. Privacy is the one Justin talked about in the beginning, which is a huge one. Being able to purchase any newspaper you want in any country you want without people knowing it is incredibly invaluable. Also, this idea of cross-chain compatibility, cross-layer compatibility. We've seen, exploits happen in the costing ordinary retail users, in the billions of dollars through these sort of cross-chain bridges. And this sort of cross-chain compatibility is different ecosystems to get built to solve different use cases. And then we have this issue of scalability, which is like how do we make a system that's open and free to use that also can process billions of transactions. And one way to do that is by using these puff chips, because they don't require the amount of consensus, hash power, or even the use of the internet to be able to process these transactions. They can happen directly peer-to-peer using a phone, or using very little power and not a very powerful internet connection. So with this kind of topology and this kind of cross-chain compatibility and this kind of privacy, to be able to privately transact at scale across ecosystems, we think we have a solution to augment crypto in a really powerful way.
So, and what are the trade-offs there too? I think, one important distinction is that this does not replace the functionality of a rollup, for example. However, because you don't have the smart contract functionality, we're talking about the transfer of assets, and that can be anything you transfer on chain. In the context of Ethereum, that's your NFTs, that's any ERC20, that's ETH itself. But the cross-chain aspect is interesting too. So the best analogy for what this opens up is if you had a completely private trustless version of Shapeshift, the earlier iteration thereof, like being able to privately exchange assets from multiple blockchains without relying on a centralized exchange. The only way we can actually accomplish that now on chain is sort of a duct tape solution. We're using trusted bridges, and those are by definition custodial. Whether they're behind a multi-sig or whatever else, it's still a single point of failure. We've seen this, as Mickey alluded to it, with Wormhole, with a lot of other well-known bridge exploits. And so it's not the best approach, and you're creating kind of a systemic level risk. The other trade-off is that with physical bearer assets, if you had a card or an eSIM loaded with the rights to these bearer phonons, which can be any crypto, and you throw them in the trash, well, that's like throwing a wad of 20s in the trash, because we have physically unique proof of you having ownership of those assets at the given time. But aside from that, it's just a completely open-ended way to access private transactions, and being able to hand someone something physically, or even you don't even have to be online. I mentioned earlier that this happens at the speed of the internet. If you had a mesh net, like you connected via Bluetooth or NFC directly, you could transfer a phone between two eSIMs. So there's no need to have any record whatsoever of this transaction. And that's a very different approach to privacy as opposed to what exists today with privacy-specific chains or zero-knowledge rollups.
Yeah, it's the ability to make anything a private bearer asset. And there's also a huge efficiency gain to be discussed. Just a capital efficiency gain. Like we do have ways of transferring, let's say, Ethereum and Bitcoin between two parties, and that's this thing we call Coinbase, right? And how does Coinbase work? They have to sit on these big pools. They have to raise a bunch of money and sit on these big pools of capital allocated in these different assets like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, what have you. And they have to hold these in sort of cold storage and hot wallets and rotate the keys in and out. And they sort of act as these intermediaries between people trying to exchange different cryptographic assets, crypto assets. But with a topology like Phonon, there's no need for that infrastructure. You can just transfer the thing that you want to transfer between another person directly, privately, peer-to-peer. As Justin is saying, you don't even need the internet to do it. You could do it using your NFC or Bluetooth. And just thinking about how much efficiency that unlocks, you basically have the power of a Coinbase that's completely decentralized and permissionless. And you don't even need to buy new hardware. You just are going to use the hardware you use for everything else. So there's a lot to discuss here. And it is an open source project, right? People will be building different applications on top of this sort of core core SDK that is being produced by Phonon and by the folks at Grid Plus. So it really is an exciting time to be working at Phonon, and we're excited to talk more. Justin, I don't know if you have anything else. We've talked a lot about private key transfer. I don't know if you have anything else. I think I just put this slide in here because that was like one of the big questions. But we kind of touched on stuff, so I don't know if you have anything else you want to add.
Yeah, just to reiterate, I just want to assuage concerns on that by saying that while private key cryptography is being used in this way, we're not talking about the private keys that you use in your wallet. It is not using your private key. It's just using the same sort of technology to generate a third-party private key that no one has complete access to. And that way, we leverage cryptography to create a bearer instrument that is unique and has the ability to be redeemed on any chain, depending on whatever the asset loaded into the Phonon is in question. Hopefully that makes sense. But again, I'll open up questions on that after. Okay, so
And this
Mickey's
is
sharing
just
a little.
yeah. Go ahead.
Mickey's sharing a little bit of an overview of what this actually looks like under the hood. And a wrapped key is what a phonon is. I don't necessarily love the approach to nomenclature, but you can think of there's Phonon, the protocol, like Bitcoin, and then there's lowercase Bitcoin, the asset. Phonons are these wrapped keys. And then what's happening as you wrap a phonon, basically, and the handshake is using a salt of leveraging the physical entropy from these two unique chips that either side of the transaction has. So it's a handshake that cannot be replicated because each person has physical possession of either their phone's eSIM or this card chip. So it's really, when we talk about using these keys, it's a source of randomness is what we're getting from the physical properties of the chips used. And then the key itself is just a third kind of storage destination as opposed to having anything to do with your own personal keys.
And thanks to Rooster, one of our community members, for writing this out. Appreciate it. I do want to talk a little bit about what's being built and where we are as far as our. Well, we're launching a testnet soon. Maybe Justin, you can talk about sort of Grid Plus's role in developing this SDK and sort of where you see the roadmap going as far as more advanced technology being built on top of Phonon.
Okay. So Grid Plus originally spun out this DAO, and we had developed this technology because we needed a scaling solution for doing a lot of microtransactions. However, so that separate project was kind of grew to be outside the scope of what we wanted to focus on. So what, like I mentioned at the beginning, I view our relationship with the DAO as sort of the DAO being the EF and us remaining on as one of the client teams. So what have we developed now? What's open source? We've got the Phonon Card Applet, which is a Java card applet for use on smart cards. We have another team working with smart card private wallets that will likely hop in after they see our reference implementation there in production. We're launching the testnet for this shortly. By shortly, I mean in the next 2 weeks or so. We'll be opening up sale of kits with cards running the testnet application and also 2 card readers. So you can try out all these things on testnet, experiment with the system, start building on top of it. And from there, too, we'll have telemetry set up for that, and with which you can get token rewards just for experimenting and stress testing the system. The client and wallet all exist to basically be reference implementations, because what we want is for as many teams out there as possible, whether they're to make either phone software, smart card software, whether CLI or GUIs for it. We want this technology to be leveraged by other teams who integrate it as a tool off the shelf, rather than this being any sort of monolithic project where we develop, everything built on top. I'm going to jump real quick to, So before I jump to your question, Barwig, I do want to say that that's the goal. We want to be, in much the way that DeFi protocols, the best ones are money Legos that are composable for doing surprising new things. We want to be that sort of building block for applications that require a tremendous amount of transactions. So they need scalability, privacy preserving applications, and interoperability, cross-chain transactions. So Barwig in the chat on here is asking, how is the anonymization guaranteed when playing the transaction back to the underlying blockchain? So there's never a need to sign with the wrapped private key, I believe. So basically, there's a smart contract interaction, and it's enabling the withdrawal of this asset. And the lead implementer should be joining shortly. What time is it? I will see if we can get
second, yeah.
Yeah, Dan might be a little bit late, but the lead implementer in terms of core development can probably give you a better answer on that. But the wrapped, as we transfer a Phonon, no one is signing with a wrapped private key. In terms of the actual, well, let me see, who is this party and what prevents them from going rogue? No, I mean, that has to all be open source. And it also depends on chain-specific implementations. So, like with Ethereum, there is going to be basically like a smart contract registry for this that is open source. But there really should not be a need to sign with that private key. Basically, we're passing along that right. I do see what you're saying, though. The actual settlement transaction does require signature. In terms of what that looks like on a technical level in the implementation, I can't really answer that. There's a few people building on the protocol here. Let's see, Hinchy just left me. He just signed off. But I think we'll get you a better answer on what that actually looks like under the hood in terms of the testnet, and I can get you some code examples. I personally am not a developer. I'm working to support the DAO on a coordination level. I helped work with the initial spin out of this. But yeah, I'll have to get you the actual code. Let's see. That's about, I mean, I feel like I've covered the basics in terms of what the protocol is, why we're building it, and what some of the potential applications are that can be built leveraging this technology. I'll open it up to Mickey or anyone else from the DAO that is champing at the bit to chime in with things that I may have glossed over. But I think that covers sort of the fundamentals. There's a great deal more to it, but this is a high-level overview of what we're building.
Yeah, and any questions, feel free to ask, and we'll do our best to answer them. Oh, I got a message. That's the question.
How do I invest?
Someone's asked me to look at the diagram. Give me a second. I'm gonna go back to the diagram.
A serious question is, how do I invest? Where is their liquidity on this?
Right now, I believe Uniswap is the best bet. So what is the relationship with the token? I can get into that a little bit. So Grid Plus spun this out. And what we did to ensure that this works is that we basically rebalanced an old janky 2017 token distribution by getting Consensus, which incubated Grid Plus originally in 2017, to burn their tokens, to rebalance this towards the DAO and the community. So there is not new issuance. Basically, what we did was rebalance the Grid token and do a token upgrade to allow this all to go into the hands of the community and the users. So I can pull up a chart for that at some point, but basically 75%, 60% goes to existing holders, 15% went to the DAO treasury. Grid Plus retained about 12% in DAO treasury, I believe, in their treasury, and we're basically only using that earmarked to support Phonon core development. Right now, we have 3 full-time employees who are working on these reference implementations, and that's 100% what they do, and we plan to grow that team extensively. But yeah, the token itself exists for a couple of reasons. One is the DAO governance. The other is that we envision this as we get more and more teams to want to integrate this technology into phone software, even under the hood. It doesn't have to be a crypto-facing application. They can actually just do like a micro license fee. So the goal is really to make this as ubiquitous as possible, to get as many different developers and companies to implement this technology. And in exchange for their keys, which basically you need each of these unique devices, each puff chip, needs a certificate issued, right? And so that happens at the time of provisioning of either a new software install or the creation of the new smart card. And so if you append, a couple of pennies to that for each instance for something that you're putting out there in the world for a very low cost, then that revenue can come back to the DAO. And then also we envision quite a bit being built on top. In particular, the cross-chain private DEX is something that people are excited about. Personally, I de-emphasize that because I'm pretty excited about what Phonon is on the most fundamental level. But that adds quite a bit to it. But I don't want to set expectations that, future-facing applications are the benchmark for us getting to where we need to be. So yeah, if you want to get involved in the DAO and participate, there's lots of ways. One, if you want to vote on our snapshot governance, you can buy the token on Uniswap, and they're setting up liquidity on Arbitrum. But the other important thing is that we want to balance voting rights in the DAO, not towards just capital being the only thing that we value. It's also contributions. So we're, of any sort of effort, whether that's design, technical writing, coordination, economics, we are eager to get people skin in the game so that they feel attachment to this project that we feel very ideologically strong about the value of. So the more people we get mission aligned, the better. So there's plenty of ways to get involved, to get voting power, without having to buy outright, although that is one option. So if you are interested in our mission and preserving financial privacy and the properties of cash on an ongoing basis for all of the crypto you currently hold, join the Discord. There's a million ways to get involved. And a few other people can probably speak to how we're doing some of that budgeting on a monthly basis. But there's quite a bit. And also, like I said, participating in the testnet will allow you, for stress testing this, to earn about somewhere in the range of I want to say $250 equivalent worth of Phonon. But the actual goals for that will be enumerated in a couple of weeks. That means actually having sufficient comfort to try a command line interface tool and experiment with a protocol. And we're going to limit that to about 200 dev kits. Pretty excited about that. And I think this is where the magic really happens, is when other people can start experimenting with it and see how powerful a primitive this is. So long answer to Uniswap, but there's a lot of ways to get involved.
I'm going to give my quick addition to that because I think it's super valuable. I mean, it's certainly you can buy the token, but if you've ever felt the call to be a part of something in Web3 that accomplishes the things that we're trying to accomplish, which is something that is essentially infinitely scalable, connecting all these different blockchains together, but isn't just a crypto application. If you wanted to be a part of a great community of really smart people building a piece of infrastructure, maybe this is your sign to join. We have a lot of roles available, and we'll just love your activity and your presence as much or more than any investment. So we're a great community. You can find us. There's links. They're on the presentation. Phonon.network is our website currently. We're of course, on Discord, and we're here to answer questions for the next 15-20 minutes. But maybe this is your sign to be a part of something. I was always full of regret that I didn't join the Bitcoin and Ethereum communities early on. I was kind of busy doing other things, and I just sort of jumped at joining Phonon for that reason. So we'd love to have all of you. Any more questions?
Barwig, if you want to DM me after too, I will make sure that we get one of the core devs to check in and explain that to you and show the code. Because in particular, this being a point where people got hung up on things with the Aladdin DAO presentation, I think it would be better for a technically minded audience to just see it for themselves. So anyone feel free to ping me on that. I'm trying to think of what else. I mean, in essence, though, we've talked quite a bit, but there's a certain degree of magic in just being able to zap assets peer to peer between secure devices and have no record. So it looks like we have a question from Mora. Or did we already cover that with the provisioning fees?
Yeah, I think the question is how does value flow token holder, and I feel we there's many ways, and I think it's still there's some open questions and open debate in our community, but I think a lot of these application layers that get built on top of the protocol, some of which I think are going to come out of the DAO, others from third parties, represent sort of the three biggest areas of opportunity in crypto, which is privacy, cross-chain compatibility, and scalability. Whether that's in microtransactions or building a secure Tor network on top of Phonon, or a cross-chain DEX, or a private marketplace for NFTs, or these things can all be done on top of Phonon, and all represent huge business opportunities, the largest business opportunities in Web3, in my opinion. And we're just getting started. Testnet is coming soon, and which is incentivized, which anyone participating can earn a small amount of money, as Justin said. And we launch Alpha. There's so much work to be done.
So there's a couple of value accrual methods that we discussed extensively as a DAO, and one of the things people thought was important was minimizing friction. So the ways that the value is accrued is not impacting end users or pending transaction fees to their off-chain transactions in a forced rent-seeking way. So first of all, there's the provisioning fees. It's basically anytime client software is provisioned. But the other interesting thing is, so we want to open this up to more manufacturers. There's one in particular who we're already exploring this with. First of all, for this to thrive, it cannot be an effort where Grid Plus looms too large. We need to make this a standard. So what are the levers in terms of economic incentives at the DAO's disposal? If we can get basically like a security bond for participating from another manufacturer, that can be a significant amount that's basically locked up in escrow, generating interest, and can be used as needed in the treasury. However, what they get out of it is, if we do token incentives to expand the network, well, it's very much like the Helium model then, right? Helium at the earliest stages, like everyone basically, before the network was bootstrapped, rushed to be among the first to get the hardware to do this low frequency Wi-Fi for IoT devices. And it became so profitable that what happened, there were eventually chip shortages, even with third-party manufacturers trying to make compatible devices. So the idea is we get other hardware manufacturers, we get software developers for phones to implement this technology. In exchange, we can help grow the network by incentivizing people to use their tools. Basically by removing the upfront costs for users. So they can grow their user base, cross-promote what they're building in exchange for their upfront cost to the DAO. And this way we also insulate users from anything like fees or having to maintain multiple tokens to transact off-chain. Then beyond all this, so this is sort of like the fundamental layer. Then where it gets interesting and where we're still debating is what can be built on top at the application layer, leveraging this, and how those things can have value flow back to the DAO as well. The cross-chain DEX is an example, privacy pools, all kinds of, I'm trying to think, let me actually look through some of the list, but those are the sort of things where if you want to integrate the technology, you can build on top of the protocol and then have those usage fees flow back. The other interesting one too, when we talk about interoperability between chains, is for having these hardware secured bridges or providing liquidity for these bridges for fast exits. Just as people do with hot protocol now, for example, if you got the Optimism airdrop, when you if you moved any ETH or Optimism tokens back to the Ethereum mainnet, you are presented with the option of which bridge you want to use. We can sort of take that approach, but apply it to the cross-chain world. So we're not tethered to, custodial bridges like with REN, TBTC, or something fully custodial like WBTC. So there's a lot of kind of greenfield open design space there, but those things are still working to be developed. And in reality, as we come onto testnet here in the next few weeks, it's much more important to get the cornerstone, the foundation of all this technology right first, which is the peer-to-peer interactions. And with that building block, the goal is to hopefully be surprised by how people leverage this. And that's the magic of open source in general too. Like much like when Ethereum was published, the goal wasn't for the EF or core devs to build every application on top. It was to give the most easy to work with, robust tooling. And we hope we can give a tool that will be useful to other developers, that they can make their vision a reality with these properties of privacy, speed, linear scaling, and interoperability. And hopefully be surprised by the magic they come up with as well.
We just had a really interesting talk on our Twitter. One of our community members, Andrew, set up a talk with Rohan Gray, who's one of the architects of some legislation coming out of the U.S. House of Representatives around central bank digital currencies, which is really interesting. And what's also very interesting is, just as we can turn, Ethereum or Bitcoin into a private bearer asset that can be given, sent peer to peer like cash instantly. Phonon potentially could do the same for a central bank digital currency. We could turn central bank digital currency, a digital dollar, into something like cash as well. And so it's like interesting to see the applications. So we're all like very, we're all very crypto oriented, I think, but it's going to be really interesting to see the applications that sort of extend beyond the crypto world. And sort of we're not just limited to the technology that, and the blockchain technology that we all love so much. We can make a lot of things private, scalable, and efficient, and that ability, that infrastructure, that topology is really important for the future. To take us back to the story that Justin was talking about. I also spent a lot of time in China, and and I had similar experiences and elsewhere. So the idea that some infrastructure that can be built peer to peer, allowing us to transfer these digital, like how many things will be digital assets in the future? Like what percentage would you guess are going to be digital assets? Like it's not just currencies, and it's not just things on blockchains. And it's really important that we have infrastructure to be able to transfer them freely, instantly, to one another. So that's another reason why I'm really excited to be part of Phonon.
Yeah, you hit on an interesting thing there. Everyone, please stop us if you have other questions. But since it was pretty quiet, Prod wants us to. I'll share the code and get that response from some of the core devs. But you hit on something interesting with the China example in particular as well. So with the Great Firewall of China, when you travel there now, you have to use a VPN, and even then, a lot of services that we take for granted in other countries are, heavily limited. In much that same way, even though when you run your own node, you can set the ports, there are ways of at least attempting to filter blockchain traffic. But if we're talking about bearer assets that can be transferred over a Bluetooth connection, NFC, or just by physically handing someone a card or a phone and giving them the PIN, you are now no longer constrained by anything that can be shut down at a network level. That's powerful as a basic primitive. Again, on we're talking about the high level applications for the heavy crypto users. But in terms of the fundamentals of personal financial freedom, being able to move stable coins around in that fashion, that's a pretty powerful new primitive. The interesting thing too, so this ties into what Rohan Gray was talking to us earlier tonight about with the eCash Act. He was sort of a kind of this vilified figure because, he's involved with the government. He's a law professor, and he took umbrage with the idea of shadow banking in general, and stable coins were the main focus of his concern. So he is very much opposed to MakerDAO. I love what MakerDAO is doing. I actually think decentralized stablecoins are one of the most important use cases for to really make crypto useful beyond speculation. I think it's just absolutely critical. But his issue was not with privacy, it was with issuance. So I actually found that to be very interesting and not a distinction I understood from when I had read comments from him prior. So he takes exception against MakerDAO because, they're backing this coin with other collaterals and issuing it. But he's saying that basically if government CBDCs existed, he thinks they should be able to be transferred privately, which I thought was an interesting perspective. It's different than mine, but I did like the fact that what he is looking for with property is for the eCash Act. They involve privacy. And so this is sort of the interesting overlap that Andrew had discovered. I think Rohan reached out to the Phonon DAO Twitter account. He'd read a little bit about the spec, and he started talking with Andrew Byerly a bit. And I kind of found that fascinating that he believes in the value of cash as well. His personal concerns rely in the guarantees about the value of assets from whomever or whatever system is issuing them. So I think that was actually sort of an encouraging thing tonight that there are people working within the confines of governments that do care about privacy. They care about the features of cash, and they care about people's financial liberty. So encouraging middle ground.
It's I'm just getting excited, sorry, but it's like there now doesn't exist a trustless private pipe in which for people to transact and share data between each other. And the promise of Phonon to me is that I always felt like even today the only real product market fit in the space is really stable coins. And maybe it's like the era of stable coins and CBDCs is the next sort of era of the next sort of phase that we're going to enter in crypto. And maybe the total market cap for stablecoins built on Ethereum will be bigger than Ethereum itself, maybe. And I think having infrastructure to be able to transact any stablecoin, any CBDC completely privately, peer-to-peer, that's not owned by any single company, right? It's not owned by Visa or MasterCard, or it's not owned by Apple, is so vital to human freedom and to commerce, and the fact that it can be built completely peer-to-peer, that doesn't even need a central location to be built. Like if you think about things like WeChat, this sort of scale from China within China and get denser and denser. But with this, it can sort of pop up everywhere where it's useful, and like our look, it's pretty exciting and different for that reason. So yeah, I was really thrilled by that conversation as well, and I think if stables and digital dollars, central bank digital currency, is the next sort of phase of the next sort of chapter in crypto's history, I think Phonon is a really interesting place to be because it provides that trustless private infrastructure that is so far lacking. Like right now, we have to give all of our information to Coinbase.
Yeah, just being able to seed a new Ethereum wallet. So yeah, Tornado Cash exists now, but what do most people do? If you don't want people following your trail on chain because you want to do something like seed your ENS associated wallet or donate to Gitcoin grants rounds, most people, what they do because of the friction and the gas cost of using Tornado is they send to Coinbase or Gemini or Kraken or any other exchange, and then they seed a new wallet from there. Well, from the perspective of regulators and exchanges, basically what exchanges have is Etherscan with names attached to your KYC AML information. So it's not a great solution for real privacy. And when you talk about critical applications for preserving value or information on chain, because we're talking about more than just cryptocurrencies, it can be anything passed around as an asset on chain, an NFT, encoded data. That's what makes it a powerful tool for preserving your own privacy and freedom with this data. Just the fact that you don't have to leave that trail. Now, an interesting thing is, though, too, with fungibility, it's much easier to preserve that privacy with, say, Ethereum or Bitcoin or any of the main chains because of the amount that will be transacted through the system. I don't know if people are familiar with Mimblewimble, which is a spec that created Grin and some other alternate approaches to it with the privacy coin. Basically, the problem they encountered, among many others, including their issuance, was something you see with any private blockchain, which is the linking issue. And you can see that with Tornado, too. So why does Tornado have uniform deposit amounts? Well, if you're the guy that deposited 420.69 ETH into Tornado and then you withdraw it elsewhere, people basically see the point of entry and the point of exit. With Phonon, you still would encounter that with something like an NFT, but it allows you at least to transact with them cheaply on and off chain. So it benefits from the interoperability aspect and the free off-chain transactions aspect. But there will have to be more infrastructure on top to preserve that privacy for more than value transfers. It's an ongoing thing, but this is an important building block.
Amazing. If there's any other questions, we're happy to answer them. Otherwise, thank you so much for hosting us, and thank you, Prod, so much for organizing and helping us get on and giving us our passes and tweeting and reaching out to us. Really appreciate it, Prod. That was wonderful, and we had a great time, and we'd love to come back anytime.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Don't hesitate to DM us, join the Phonon Discord. If it's okay with Prod and the mods, we can drop like a link to the Discord.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, learn more, please.
Before hopping off, I would just like to add that I completely agree with Mickey. Justin have a beautiful voice.
We agree. He's got one of the most beautiful voices in crypto.
You guys
I
are
agree.
very, very, very kind. Thank you.
There's competition in
In a read-off.
Sorry?
Tuesdays is another community member we have with another sultry voice, as it were.
and Andrew. We have really a lot of great voices in the DAO.
All right, we're gonna stop scratching our own back. Swear.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. There's Tuesdays. I was talking over his sweet dulcet tones.
My apologies.
All right, we gotta go. Bye, guys.
Yeah, thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks for joining
Throw
me.
a link to our Discord in this chat here. Maybe that's the best way to do it. And thanks, everybody.